The blade ignites with a crimson hiss, casting shadows that dance like specters across ancient stone walls. In that moment, when plasma meets purpose and rage crystallizes into form, the Sith way of combat reveals itself, not through peace, but through passion, not through serenity, but through strength. The lightsaber becomes more than a weapon in Sith hands. It becomes an extension of will, a physical manifestation of power drawn from the deepest wells of emotion that the Force can offer. For thousands of years, the Sith have approached lightsaber combat fundamentally differently than their Jedi counterparts. Where the Jedi seek to suppress emotion and find balance, the Sith embrace the storm within. They channel anger, fear, and unbridled ambition into every strike, every parry, every calculated movement. This philosophical divide runs deeper than simple light versus dark. It shapes how each tradition develops techniques, trains apprentices, and ultimately views the very nature of combat itself. The history of Sith lightsaber techniques begins not with the Sith themselves, but with fallen Jedi, who were cast out into the unknown regions over 7,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. These dark Jedi brought with them knowledge of early lightsaber forms, but isolation and their embrace of dark side philosophy allowed them to evolve these techniques into something entirely new. On the Sith homeworld of Korriban, surrounded by a culture that valued strength above all else, these warriors began to develop combat styles that prioritized aggression, domination, and the overwhelming of opponents through sheer emotional force. Unlike Jedi training, which emphasizes defensive capabilities and the protection of others, Sith combat training has always focused on personal power. A Sith duelist does not fight merely to defend themselves or to bring an opponent to justice. They fight to dominate, to prove their superiority, and to take what they desire by force. This fundamental difference in motivation creates entirely different approaches to the same 7 classical forms of lightsaber combat that both Jedi and Sith study. The Jedi might learn Form 2 to counter dark side duelists with precision. The Sith learn Form 2 to dissect opponents with surgical efficiency, exploiting every weakness with cruel elegance. The Jedi might study Form 5 to better defend against overwhelming attacks. The Sith study Form 5 to become the overwhelming attack, to crush resistance beneath devastating power strikes that leave no room for counterplay. Every form in Sith hands transforms from a method of combat into an instrument of domination. The relationship between emotion and combat effectiveness lies at the heart of Sith technique. The dark side of the Force feeds on strong emotions, growing more powerful as passion intensifies. Fear can sharpen reflexes to superhuman levels. Anger can amplify strength beyond normal physical limitations. Hatred can sustain a warrior through wounds that would fell lesser beings. The Sith understand that these emotions are not weaknesses to be suppressed, but weapons to be wielded with the same skill as any lightsaber blade. This creates a dangerous feedback loop that only the most disciplined Sith can survive. The very emotions that grant them power in combat can also lead to their downfall if allowed to spiral beyond control. A Sith consumed entirely by rage may possess overwhelming strength, but loses the tactical awareness necessary to apply that strength effectively. The greatest Sith warriors are not those who surrender completely to emotion, but those who ride the edge, channeling dark passion into focused intent without losing themselves to it entirely. The ancient Sith lords understood this balance better than most. Tuluk Hord, the great conqueror who extended Sith influence across distant star systems, was renowned not just for his raw power, but for his ability to blend ferocious assault with calculated strategy. Marka Ragnos maintained his position as Dark Lord for over a century, partly through his mastery of manipulating others, but also through combat prowess that could eliminate any challenger who pushed too far. These legendary figures proved that Sith combat mastery required more than simple brutality. As lightsaber combat evolved over millennia, the Sith continually pushed boundaries that the Jedi considered forbidden or dishonorable. When the Jedi Council restricted certain aggressive applications of Form 7, the Sith embraced them wholeheartedly. When psychological warfare tactics were deemed beneath the dignity of Jedi Knights, the Sith refined them into the devastating art of Dun Muk. Every restriction the Jedi placed on lightsaber combat became an opportunity for the Sith to explore techniques their enemies would not. This willingness to embrace forbidden knowledge gave the Sith advantages in individual combat situations, even when outnumbered by Jedi forces. A single Sith Lord, properly trained and channeling the dark side effectively, could hold their own against multiple Jedi Knights. The Sith compensated for their smaller numbers throughout history by producing warriors of exceptional individual capability, each one a match for several Jedi in direct combat. The structure of Sith training itself reinforced this focus on individual excellence. Unlike the Jedi, who trained in large groups and emphasized cooperation, Sith apprentices typically learned from a single master in isolation. This one-on-one instruction allowed for deeply personalized combat training tailored to the apprentice's specific strengths, weaknesses, and psychological profile. A master could mold their student into a perfect instrument of destruction, crafting techniques that played to their natural talents while eliminating exploitable vulnerabilities. But this intimate training relationship also contained danger. The rule of two, established by Darth Bane 1,000 years before the Clone Wars, formalized what had always been an undercurrent in Sith philosophy. The apprentice must eventually surpass and destroy the master. This created a constant pressure for innovation in combat techniques. A Sith apprentice could not simply copy their master's fighting style and expect to defeat them. They had to evolve, to discover new applications of old techniques, to push boundaries their master might never have considered. This evolutionary pressure drove Sith lightsaber techniques to heights the Jedi rarely achieved. When Darth Maul modified Form 7 to work with a double-bladed lightsaber, he was not just adapting an existing form, he was creating something new that would challenge Jedi who had never encountered such a weapon. When Darth Vader combined the aggressive offense of Form 5 with the tight defense of Form 3, he was compensating for physical limitations while simultaneously creating a hybrid style that proved devastatingly effective. When Count Dooku perfected the elegant precision of Form 2 to a degree unseen in generations, he was honoring ancient tradition while pushing dueling arts to new levels of refinement. Form 2, Makashi, the elegant assassin. The curved hilt rests in the palm like a natural extension of the hand, its weight distributed perfectly for precision rather than power. Form 2, known to its practitioners as Makashi or the contention form, represents lightsaber combat distilled to its purest essence. Where other forms account for blaster deflection or multiple opponents, Makashi focuses on the one scenario that truly matters to the Sith. One warrior standing against another, lightsaber to lightsaber, with skill alone determining the victor. Makashi emerged during an era when lightsaber duels became commonplace throughout the galaxy. Dark Jedi and rogue Force sensitives roamed freely, and conflicts between Force users escalated from philosophical disagreements to armed confrontation. The techniques of Form Y, Shicho, proved inadequate for these new challenges. Shicho had been developed when lightsabers were still new, its sweeping strikes designed for fighting multiple opponents with conventional weapons. Against another lightsaber wielder of comparable skill, Shicho's broad movements created openings that a precise opponent could exploit ruthlessly. Form 2 was created specifically to address these weaknesses. Every aspect of Makashi focuses on the unique properties of lightsaber-to-lightsaber combat. Unlike traditional blades, lightsabers have no weight in their blade, only in the hilt. They possess an omnidirectional cutting edge, capable of inflicting lethal damage from any angle of contact. These properties demanded entirely new approaches to footwork, blade angle, and defensive positioning. The Sith took to Makashi with particular enthusiasm because it aligned perfectly with their philosophy of individual superiority. Makashi does not work well in chaotic battles with multiple opponents. It offers limited protection against blaster fire, but in single combat, where one warrior faces another in a test of pure skill, Makashi reigns supreme. For the Sith, who valued personal power above all else, this made Makashi an ideal form to master. Count Dooku, once a respected Jedi master who fell to the dark side to become Darth Tyrannus, became the most famous modern practitioner of Makashi. His mastery of the form was so complete that he chose to construct a lightsaber with a curved hilt, an unusual design that had fallen out of fashion, but which perfectly complemented Makashi's requirements for one-handed precision work. The curved hilt offered several advantages that Dooku exploited ruthlessly. The curve aligned naturally with the wrist's motion, reducing strain during extended duels and allowing for more fluid transitions between offensive and defensive maneuvers. It provided superior blade control, enabling minute adjustments to blade angle that could mean the difference between a parry and a kill. The design improved grip security, ensuring the weapon would not be easily disarmed, a constant concern for Makashi duelists who relied on maintaining weapon possession throughout lengthy engagements. Dooku's curved hilt lightsaber featured additional refinements that showcased his attention to detail. The emitter incorporated an angular blade guard that protected his hand without impeding his grip. A thumb trigger allowed him to activate a dual-phase setting, shortening the blade unexpectedly during close quarters exchanges to slip past an opponent's guard. Every element of the weapon's construction served the Makashi philosophy of technical perfection and controlled precision. The fighting stance of Makashi reflects its dueling heritage. Practitioners adopt a sideways orientation, presenting a narrow profile to their opponent while maintaining balance and mobility. The lightsaber is held primarily in one hand, though the offhand may be positioned near the body for balance or extended behind for counterweight. This stance appears almost formal, like ancient fence positions, and indeed, Makashi draws heavily from traditional sword-fighting disciplines adapted for lightsaber combat. Footwork in Makashi emphasizes economy of motion. Rather than the explosive movements of more aggressive forms, Makashi duelists glide across the combat space with measured steps. They advance and retreat in a constant flow, adjusting distance with precision to keep opponents at optimal range. The goal is never to remain stationary, always to be moving, making it difficult for an opponent to time their strikes effectively, while the Makashi user maintains perfect control over engagement distance. The blade work itself focuses on tight, controlled movements. Makashi practitioners do not rely on powerful swings or broad slashes. Instead, they employ precise cuts, targeted thrusts, and subtle deflections that turn an opponent's blade aside with minimal energy expenditure. Every motion serves a purpose, whether creating an opening, defending against an attack, or probing for weaknesses in the opponent's technique. One of Makashi's greatest strengths is its efficiency. The form is designed for lengthy duels where stamina becomes a decisive factor. By minimizing unnecessary movement and relying on technique rather than physical strength, a Makashi master can outlast opponents who tire themselves with more energetic forms. Dooku demonstrated this principle repeatedly, engaging multiple Jedi in succession without showing signs of fatigue, his technique remaining flawless through engagement after engagement. The Sith application of Makashi incorporates psychological elements that the Jedi version typically lacks. Count Dooku, in particular, excelled at combining perfect technique with verbal manipulation, using the Sith art of Dun Mukh to unsettle opponents while maintaining impeccable form. He would point out weaknesses in an opponent's defense even as he exploited them, eroding confidence with words while dismantling defenses with his blade. Against Obi-Wan Kenobi on Geonosis, Dooku's Makashi proved overwhelmingly superior. Kenobi, a master of defensive form 3, found his guard systematically penetrated by precise strikes that found openings he did not know existed. Dooku's blade flickered through Kenobi's defense like a serpent's tongue, drawing blood with calculated efficiency before moving to engage Anakin Skywalker. The young Jedi's aggressive Form V style proved equally ineffective, as Dooku used minimal movements to deflect power strikes, letting Anakin's own momentum work against him. The curved hilt played a crucial role in these encounters. The design allowed Dooku to create unusual blade angles that opponents found difficult to read and counter. Where a straight hilt might telegraph the direction of an attack through its alignment, the curved hilt could hide intent until the last possible moment. This unpredictability, combined with flawless technique, made Dooku one of the most feared duelists in the galaxy, despite his advanced age. Asajj Ventress, Dooku's assassin and sometime apprentice, studied Makashi under his tutelage. She wielded twin curved hilt lightsabers, adapting the form to a dual-wielding style that sacrificed some of Makashi's precision for increased offensive pressure. Ventress's version was rougher than her master's, lacking his perfect economy of motion, but it proved effective nonetheless. Her battles against Jedi like Ahsoka Tano and Luminara Unduli demonstrated how Makashi's core principles could be adapted to different fighting styles while maintaining the form's essential character. The Makashi salute, a traditional gesture performed before formal duels, reveals much about the form's philosophy. The practitioner extends their lightsaber forward in one hand, the blade held at a precise angle, while the offhand is positioned behind. This salute acknowledges the opponent as a worthy adversary deserving of respect, even as it subtly advertises the duelist's confidence and control. Dooku maintained this tradition even as a Sith Lord, honoring the ancient customs of his chosen form regardless of his allegiance. Despite its strengths in single combat, Makashi possesses clear weaknesses that skilled opponents can exploit. The form's optimization for lightsaber dueling leaves it vulnerable to force-based attacks. An opponent who abandons weapon combat to assault the Makashi user with force lightning, telekinetic pushes, or other abilities can circumvent the form's carefully constructed defenses. Dooku compensated for this weakness through his own considerable force abilities, but the vulnerability remained. Multiple opponents pose perhaps the greatest challenge for Makashi practitioners. The form's narrow focus on single-target engagement provides limited tools for dealing with attacks from multiple angles simultaneously. When surrounded, a Makashi duelist must rely on superior footwork and positioning to avoid being overwhelmed, and even then, success is far from guaranteed. This limitation explains why Makashi fell somewhat out of favor during the Clone Wars, when Jedi increasingly faced battle droids attacking in swarms rather than individual duelists. Blaster deflection represents another weakness. While Makashi practitioners can certainly deflect blaster bolts, the form does not emphasize this skill as heavily as defensive-oriented forms, like Soresu. The tight, precise movements that excel in blade-to-blade combat are less suited to the broader, more instinctive motions needed for effective blaster defense. A Makashi duelist caught in crossfire from multiple blaster-wielding opponents faces significant disadvantage. Physical strength-based forms can also challenge Makashi if applied with sufficient power. The elegant precision of Makashi relies on deflection and redirection rather than meeting force with force. Against an opponent who simply overpowers their defenses through brute strength, as Anakin Skywalker eventually learned to do, Makashi's technical superiority may not be enough. Dooku's ultimate defeat at Anakin's hands during the Battle of Coruscant illustrated this vulnerability, as the young Jedi's raw power, amplified by rage and channeling the dark side, broke through technique that had stood undefeated for decades. Yet despite these limitations, Makashi remains one of the most respected forms among Sith warriors who value skill and refinement. The form represents a philosophy that power without control is wasted, that true mastery comes not from overwhelming force, but from precision so perfect that force becomes unnecessary. In Sith hands, Makashi becomes an art form where every strike is measured, every defense calculated, and every victory a testament to superiority of technique. The curved hilt lightsaber itself has become emblematic of Makashi mastery. Though not all Makashi practitioners use one, the design represents a commitment to the form's principles, a physical manifestation of the wielder's dedication to dueling perfection. For Count Dooku, the curved hilt was not merely a tool, but a symbol of his identity as a duelist, a statement that he was not some common warrior swinging a lightsaber with brute force, but rather an artist whose weapon was shaped by centuries of refinement. In the hierarchy of Sith combat philosophies, Makashi occupies a unique position. It does not exemplify the overwhelming aggression of Form 7 or the dominating power of Form 5. Instead, It represents calculated efficiency, the application of minimum necessary force to achieve maximum effect. This appeals to Sith who see themselves as sophisticated, who view combat as intellectual exercise as much as physical contest, who take pride in defeating opponents through superior skill rather than merely superior strength. Forma 4, Ataru, acrobatic fury. Where Makashi flows like water, controlled and precise, Forma 4 erupts like a wildfire, chaotic and consuming. Known as Ataru, or the aggression form, this style transforms the battlefield into a three-dimensional arena where gravity becomes merely another suggestion to be overcome through force-enhanced athleticism. In Sith hands, Ataru channels raw emotion into kinetic violence, turning rage and passion into physical manifestation as the warrior becomes a blur of motion too fast for conventional eyes to follow. Ataru emerged during an era when Force users had grown comfortable with their powers, when the connection between warrior and Force had deepened to the point where superhuman feats became not just possible, but expected. The form's development reflected growing understanding that the Force could augment physical capabilities far beyond normal limitations. Where earlier forms relied primarily on technique with the Force as supplement, Ataru makes Force enhancement fundamental to every movement. The core philosophy of Ataru is simple: end a fight as quickly as possible through overwhelming offensive assault. Practitioners launch themselves at opponents with force-enhanced leaps, striking from unexpected angles with such speed and ferocity that defense becomes impossible. The form sacrifices defensive capabilities, eschews energy conservation, and abandons any pretense of measured combat. Ataru is pure aggression, channeled through athletic prowess into an unstoppable assault that seeks to overwhelm before the opponent can mount effective resistance. For the Sith, who embrace passion and channel emotion into power, Ataru provides an ideal outlet. The form does not ask its practitioners to suppress their rage or control their aggression. Instead, it demands they unleash these emotions fully, letting fury fuel leaps that carry them impossible distances, letting anger drive strikes that blur together into streams of attacks too numerous to count. Where a Jedi might practice Ataru with controlled intensity, a Sith practitioner throws themselves into the form with abandon, trusting dark side power to carry them through. The physical demands of Ataru are extraordinary. Practitioners must maintain constant motion, leaping, spinning, and rolling with tireless energy. The form requires phenomenal core strength, explosive leg power, and flexibility that borders on superhuman. Hours of training develop the muscles and conditioning necessary, but ultimately, success in Ataru depends on force ability. A practitioner weak in the Force will quickly exhaust themselves attempting the acrobatics the form requires. A strong Force user, particularly one drawing on dark side emotions, can maintain the assault indefinitely, their rage sustaining them when physical stamina would fail. Darth Maul exemplified Ataru mastery in Sith hands. Trained from childhood by Darth Sidious, Maul developed a variant of the form specifically adapted for the double-bladed lightsaber he wielded. Traditional Ataru focuses on single blade work, but Maul transformed the principles to accommodate his weapon of choice, creating something new in the process. His fighting style combined Ataru's acrobatic assault with Juyo's unpredictable aggression, resulting in a hybrid approach that proved devastatingly effective. The double-bladed lightsaber, or saber staff, presents unique advantages and challenges for Ataru practitioners. The weapon provides attack coverage in multiple directions, making it ideal for the spinning, sweeping motions that characterize Ataru's most spectacular techniques. An opponent facing a spinning saber staff must defend against attacks from constantly changing angles, the blade becoming a wheel of crimson light that seems to attack everywhere simultaneously. Maul's duel against Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi on Naboo showcased Ataru's potential in Sith hands. Despite facing two skilled Jedi simultaneously, Maul held his own through sheer speed and aggression. He leaped from platform to platform in the Theed power generator, using the vertical environment to create attack angles the Jedi struggled to defend against. His saber staff became a blur as he pressed the assault, forcing both Jedi onto the defensive despite their numerical advantage. The death of Qui-Gon Jinn at Maul's hands demonstrated Ataru's killing potential. When separated from Obi-Wan by energy barriers, Maul focused his assault on the Elder Jedi Master. Qui-Gon, though skilled, relied on a more measured approach that proved insufficient against Maul's relentless aggression. The Sith's blade found its mark with a precision thrust, exploiting a momentary opening created by the overwhelming pace of his attack. In that moment, Ataru's philosophy proved itself: end the fight quickly, give no quarter. Overwhelmed through speed and fury, the form's emphasis on aerial combat creates spectacular visual displays that serve psychological purposes beyond mere combat effectiveness. An Ataru, master spinning through the air, lightsaber tracing complex patterns around them, presents an intimidating sight. For Sith, who understand the value of fear as a weapon, this intimidation factor amplifies the form's effectiveness. Opponents who hesitate, who doubt their ability to defend against such an assault, have already lost half the battle before blades even meet. Force-enhanced acrobatics allow Ataru practitioners to navigate environments that would hinder other forms. Narrow catwalks, vertical surfaces, cluttered spaces filled with obstacles all become advantages rather than impediments. The Ataru user flows through the environment, using every surface as a launch point, every obstacle as a stepping stone. This environmental adaptability makes the form particularly effective in urban or industrial settings where traditional fighting space is limited. The aggressive nature of Ataru aligns naturally with Sith philosophy regarding the application of power. The Sith do not believe in measured response or proportional force. They believe in overwhelming advantage in using every ounce of power available to crush opposition completely. Ataru embodies this philosophy, transforming the Sith's emotional intensity into kinetic assault that seeks not merely to defeat, but to dominate, not merely to win, but to overwhelm so completely that victory becomes inevitable. However, Ataru's weaknesses are as pronounced as its strengths. The constant motion and acrobatic techniques drain stamina rapidly, even with force enhancement. A practitioner who cannot end a fight quickly may find themselves exhausted, vulnerable to a patient opponent who outlasts their initial fury. The form's offensive focus leaves few defensive options, making the practitioner vulnerable to counterattacks from skilled opponents who can read patterns in the aggressive assault. Multiple opponents present particular challenges for Ataru. While the form's mobility allows engagement from various angles, maintaining the concentrated assault necessary for Ataru's effectiveness becomes difficult when attention must be divided. The aerial acrobatics that make the form spectacular also create moments of vulnerability while airborne, when changes in direction become impossible and trajectory becomes predictable. Blaster fire poses serious threats to Ataru practitioners. The form's constant motion makes the wielder a moving target, which provides some defense. But the offensive focus means less attention devoted to active blaster deflection. In battles involving significant ranged fire, Ataru users must either close distance quickly or risk being cut down before reaching their targets. The dark side enhances Ataru in ways unavailable to Jedi practitioners. Dark side-fueled rage can sustain the physical exertion longer than discipline alone. Fear can sharpen reflexes beyond normal capabilities, allowing split-second reactions that make the difference between successful acrobatics and fatal mistakes. Hatred can amplify striking power, turning already devastating attacks into killing blows that shear through defenses. Where a Jedi using Ataru must carefully manage their emotional state to avoid dark side temptation, a Sith can draw deeply from these emotions without restraint. This emotional enhancement explains why many of history's most aggressive Sith Lords favored Ataru or incorporated its principles into their fighting styles. The form rewards those who commit fully to the assault, who throw themselves into combat with complete abandonment of restraint. For warriors channeling dark side power, this commitment comes naturally. The Sith do not hold back, do not second guess, do not hesitate. They attack with everything they possess, and Ataru transforms that commitment into overwhelming physical assault. The spinning techniques characteristic of Ataru deserve particular attention. A properly executed spin combines offense and defense in a single motion, the rotating blade creating a shield that deflects incoming attacks while simultaneously threatening the opponent with strikes from unexpected angles. In Sith hands, particularly with double-bladed lightsabers, these spins become nearly impossible to penetrate. The speed of rotation, enhanced by force power and driven by aggressive intent, creates a barrier of energy that few can penetrate. Maul's final moments on Naboo illustrated both Ataru's strengths and its risks. His aggressive assault had succeeded in killing one Jedi and nearly defeating the second. But Obi-Wan's desperate counterattack, launched from what should have been an impossible position, exploited the momentary vulnerability created by Maul's focus on pressing his advantage. The very aggression that made Ataru deadly also created openings for opponents with sufficient desperation and skill to exploit them. Form V, Jim. So, power through domination. If Makashi is the scalpel and Ataru the whirlwind, then Form Vi stands as the hammer, brutal and direct, known in its dominant variant as Jim. So, though its earlier incarnation Xian focused on blaster deflection, Form V represents the evolution from defense to offense, from patient waiting to aggressive dominance. In Sith hands, Form V becomes the ultimate expression of overwhelming power, the physical embodiment of dark side philosophy that victory belongs to the strong. Form Bahav emerged from perceived inadequacies in Form 3, Soresu, which focused entirely on defense. Soresu practitioners could defend themselves indefinitely, creating impenetrable barriers of lightsaber work that blaster fire and enemy strikes could not penetrate. However, this defensive focus meant fights could drag on indefinitely, with the Soresu user waiting for opponents to make mistakes rather than creating opportunities through offensive action. Some Jedi Masters, recognizing this limitation, sought to develop a form that maintained defensive capabilities while adding aggressive counterattacking elements. The result was Form 5, which exists in two variants. Xian, the earlier version, focused on deflecting blaster fire back at attackers, transforming the enemy's weapons into tools against them. Gem, so developed later, emphasized lightsaber-to-lightsaber combat, using solid defensive blocks followed immediately by devastating counterattacks. Both variants share the underlying philosophy: use the opponent's own force against them, but do so aggressively rather than waiting passively for opportunities. For the Sith, Gemso proved particularly appealing. The form's emphasis on overwhelming power through superior strength aligned perfectly with dark side principles. Where a Jedi might use Gemso's counterattacks with measured force, a Sith practitioner channels rage and aggression into strikes intended not merely to deflect, but to shatter the opponent's defense completely. Every block becomes preparation for crushing counterstrike. Every defense a prelude to overwhelming offense. Anakin Skywalker, before his transformation into Darth Vader, exemplified the aggressive potential of Form Buffet. His natural strength and fearlessness made him ideally suited to the form's demands. He would meet incoming attacks with solid blocks, then immediately launch counter-offensives with such power that opponents found themselves driven backward, struggling desperately to defend against the onslaught. His dueling style favored decisive action, seeking to end fights quickly through superior force rather than drawn-out tactical exchanges. Some Jedi expressed concerns about Form V, feeling that its aggressive nature bordered on un-Jedi-like behavior. The form encourages practitioners to press advantages relentlessly, to use overwhelming force rather than minimum necessary action. These concerns proved prophetic in Anakin's case, as his preference for Form Phi both reflected and reinforced character traits that eventually led him to the dark side. As Darth Vader, Anakin's Form 5S evolved to accommodate his new circumstances. The injuries sustained on Mustafar left him encased in a life support suit that severely limited his physical mobility. The acrobatic leaps and rapid movements that characterized his fighting style as Anakin became impossible. Yet rather than abandon Form 5, Vader adapted it, creating a hybrid approach that combined Gemso's aggressive power with Soresu's defensive discipline. Vader's new body, though limited in movement, possessed advantages his organic form lacked. Cybernetic limbs provided strength beyond normal human capability. Servomotors and mechanical joints never tired the way muscle did. The suit's armor plating added mass that could be used to great effect in strikes and blocks. Vader transformed these advantages into devastating applications of Form Phi principles, using mechanical strength to amplify the form's already considerable power. The result was a fighting style that appeared almost crude compared to the graceful blade work of masters like Count Dooku, yet proved brutally effective. Vader would establish defensive positions, his blade creating an impenetrable barrier, then explode into offense with strikes that could literally throw opponents across rooms. His counterattacks carried such force that defending against them became an ordeal, each block sending shock waves through an opponent's arms, weakening their grip, setting up the killing blow. The intimidation factor of Vader's combat style cannot be overstated. The sight of the Dark Lord advancing steadily, deflecting all attacks with mechanical precision, then unleashing devastating counterstrikes with the inevitability of a falling star, broke the morale of many opponents before physical combat even truly began. This psychological element complemented the physical technique, another layer in Vader's mastery of domination through strength. Form V's philosophy of domination through superior power extends beyond mere physical strength. The form teaches practitioners to control the momentum and pace of combat, to dictate when engagement occurs and when it does not. A Form 5 master decides when to defend and when to attack, when to press advantage and when to fall back to re-establish position. This control over combat tempo gives Form V practitioners an agency that purely defensive forms lack, the heavy strikes characteristic of Gem. So serve multiple purposes beyond direct damage. Each powerful blow tests the opponent's strength and resolve. Can they maintain their grip under the shock of impact? Can they hold their ground against force that threatens to throw them off balance? These tests accumulate over the course of combat, gradually weakening the opponent even when no direct hit is scored. Eventually, their defense falters, their strength fails, and the killing blow finds its mark. Vader demonstrated this principle repeatedly in his hunts of surviving Jedi during the Great Purge. Former Jedi Knights and Masters, skilled in various forms, found themselves completely overmatched by Vader's relentless assault. He would press forward inexorably, his blade work technically perfect, despite his mechanical body, his strikes carrying force that lesser opponents simply could not withstand. One by one, survivors of Order 66 fell before him, their techniques and abilities insufficient against overwhelming power, applied with flawless discipline. The combination of Form 5 with Form 3 that Vader developed addresses one of Gem So's traditional weaknesses. Standard Gem So, with its focus on powerful counterattacks, can leave practitioners vulnerable during the transition from defense to offense. The moment of shifting from defensive posture to counterattack creates a brief window where defenses are momentarily weakened. Vader's incorporation of Sorasu principles minimized this vulnerability, maintaining defensive integrity even while preparing devastating counterstrikes. This hybrid approach also provided better protection for Vader's life support systems. The chest-mounted control panel and breathing apparatus represented critical vulnerabilities that Vader could not allow to be exposed. Sorasu's emphasis on tight, economical defensive movements that keep the body covered aligned perfectly with the need to protect these systems. Combined with Gem So's aggressive counterattacking when opportunities arose, Vader created a style uniquely suited to his circumstances, yet devastatingly effective against any opponent. The Force plays a crucial role in Form 5, though differently than in Ataru. Where Ataru uses Force enhancement for acrobatic feats, Form 5 employs Force power to amplify striking strength and defensive stability. A Form 5 master channels Force energy into their strikes, making each blow carry weight beyond what physical strength alone could generate. They root themselves with Force power during defense, making their stance unshakable against attacks that would throw lesser warriors off balance. Vader's Force abilities amplified his Form 5 to terrifying levels. His telekinetic power could enhance strikes with invisible force. His precognition allowed him to position for counterattacks before opponents even committed to their assault. He could use Force push to create openings, Force choke to distract or disable, all while maintaining the offensive pressure that Form 5 demands. The synergy between his combat style and Force abilities made him perhaps the most dangerous lightsaber duelist of his era. The philosophical alignment between Sith beliefs and Form V's principles runs deeper than simple aggression. The Form's emphasis on seizing control, on dominating through superior strength, on overwhelming opposition through the application of irresistible force, all these elements resonate with core Sith teachings about the nature of power. The Sith believe the strong should rule, that might makes right, that the weak exist to serve or be destroyed. Form 5 translates this philosophy into combat technique, where a Jedi using Form 5 might struggle with the line between appropriate force and excessive aggression. A Sith faces no such conflict. The Sith practitioner channels dark side power without restraint, unleashing the full fury of their abilities without concern for concepts like proportional response or minimum necessary force. They strike with intent to kill, to dominate, to prove their superiority beyond any doubt. This commitment allows Sith users of Form 5 to access power levels that Jedi practitioners, constrained by their code, cannot reach. The duel between Vader and his son Luke Skywalker on the second Death Star showcased Form 5 at its most dramatic. Luke, who had developed his own Form 5 style based on limited training, faced his father in single combat with the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance. The exchange demonstrated how the same form could be used with entirely different intent. Luke fighting to redeem, Vader fighting to dominate and convert. In the end, Luke's temporary embrace of rage and dark side power allowed him to overwhelm Vader's defenses through pure Form 5 power, demonstrating how emotion amplifies the style's effectiveness, even as it highlighted the dangers of surrendering to that power. Form 5 remains one of the most practiced styles among Sith warriors because it requires no elaborate philosophy or complex theoretical understanding. The Form's principles are direct and obvious: block strong, strike harder. This simplicity makes it accessible to apprentices while offering depth enough to occupy masters for lifetimes. It scales elegantly from basic to advanced, from simple power strikes to sophisticated combinations of offense and defense that only masters can execute. The legacy of Form 5 in Sith tradition cannot be overstated. From Anakin's aggressive assault style to Vader's inevitable advance, from Luke's rage-fueled fury to countless lesser-known Sith warriors throughout history, Form 5 has proven itself the form of choice for those who believe power determines destiny. It embodies Sith philosophy in every strike, translating the raw force of dark side emotion into physical domination that overwhelms all opposition. Form 7, Juyo, embracing the chaos. There exists a form of lightsaber combat so fierce, so demanding, so inherently dangerous that the Jedi Order restricted its practice for centuries. Form Tevim, known as Juyo in its original incarnation, or the ferocity form to those who witnessed its terrible beauty in action, represents the absolute limit of aggressive lightsaber technique. Where other forms channel emotion into combat, Juyo demands practitioners become emotion itself, transforming rage and passion into physical manifestation through blade work so unpredictable, so chaotic, that defending against it borders on impossible. The origins of Juyo reach back millennia, developing during an era when Force users regularly confronted one another in combat. Unlike forms designed for specific scenarios, Juyo emerged from the crucible of actual warfare between Force-sensitive opponents. Its techniques evolved through trial and error, refined by survivors of countless duels who learned that sometimes controlled aggression falls short, that sometimes survival requires abandoning restraint entirely and committing to assault so overwhelming that the opponent breaks before establishing any coherent defense. The Jedi Order viewed Huyo with deep suspicion from its inception. The form's requirement that practitioners channel inner darkness, that they embrace emotions the Jedi Code explicitly forbids, made it anathema to traditional Jedi philosophy. Masters feared that students who learned Huyo would be seduced by the power that came from unleashing suppressed emotions, that the line between controlled use of anger for combat and surrendering to the dark side was too thin to maintain safely. For long periods, the Jedi banned Juyo entirely, treating knowledge of the form as forbidden lore too dangerous to teach. The Sith, naturally, embraced what the Jedi rejected. Juyo's demands aligned perfectly with Sith philosophy regarding emotion and power. Where a Jedi struggled to access Juyo's full potential while maintaining connection to the light, a Sith practitioner channeled dark side power directly into the form, unrestricted by moral concerns or codes limiting emotional expression. The result was Juyo combat of a ferocity that Jedi practitioners could never match, blade work so aggressive and unrelenting that opponents often broke psychologically before physical defeat. Darth Maul stands as perhaps the most famous Sith practitioner of Juyo in recent galactic history. Trained from childhood by Darth Sidious, Maul learned Juyo as his primary form. His entire combat philosophy, built around the form's principles of overwhelming aggression and unpredictable assault. His mastery proved so complete that he successfully adapted Juyo principles to the double-bladed lightsaber, creating something new and terrifying in the process. The traditional Juyo stance differs markedly from the formal positions of other forms. Where Makashi adopts an almost ceremonial posture and Soresu presents a defensive crouch, Juyo practitioners often appear loose, almost casual, their blade held in seemingly unstandardized positions. This apparent lack of form is deliberate, a feature rather than flaw. By avoiding recognizable stances, Juyo practitioners give opponents no reliable information about their intent, no patterns to read, no tells that might telegraph the direction of the next attack. The blade work itself embodies controlled chaos. Strikes come from unexpected angles, transitioning between high and low, left and right without obvious pattern. The rhythm breaks and reforms constantly, denying opponents the ability to time their defenses effectively. One moment, the assault proceeds at measured pace. The next, it explodes into blinding speed. Powerful blows alternate with precise thrusts. Wide slashes transition instantly to tight cuts. The unpredictability is the point, the chaos the weapon. Yet beneath this apparent randomness lies sophisticated technique. True Juyo mastery requires absolute control even while appearing to abandon it. Every strike, no matter how wild it seems, must be deliberate and recoverable. Every opening created in the Juyo user's own defense must be intentional, part of a larger tactical picture. The greatest Juyo masters achieve a state where their technique becomes instinctive, where conscious thought surrenders to combat flow while training and discipline maintain the underlying control that prevents self-destructive mistakes. This balance between controlled technique and unleashed emotion creates enormous psychological pressure on practitioners. The mind must simultaneously let go and hold on, must abandon restraint while maintaining essential discipline. Many who attempt to learn Huyo fail not from lack of physical skill, but from inability to maintain this psychological equilibrium. They either hold back too much, reducing Huyo to merely aggressive applications of other forms, or they surrender completely to emotion, losing the technical precision that makes Juyo effective rather than simply wild. For Sith practitioners, channeling dark side power provides advantage in maintaining this balance. The dark side feeds on emotion while also offering clarity of purpose. A Sith in combat, drawing on rage and hatred, can achieve a state of focused fury where emotion enhances rather than impairs technique. The anger sharpens rather than clouds. The aggression empowers rather than makes reckless. This dark side advantage allows Sith Juyo practitioners to access power levels that Jedi users of the form cannot safely reach. Darth Maul's application of Juyo during his duel with Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi showcased the form's devastating potential. Despite facing two skilled Jedi simultaneously, a situation that should have overwhelmed any single combatant, Maul's Juyo technique allowed him to maintain offensive pressure against both opponents. His double-bladed lightsaber spun through complex patterns, each rotation creating multiple attack vectors that the Jedi struggled to defend against simultaneously. The killing blow against Qui-Gon demonstrated Juyo's efficiency when opportunity presents itself. Separated from Obi-Wan by the laser barriers in the Theed power generator, Maul focused his full attention on the Elder Jedi Master. The assault intensified, strike after strike, testing Qui-Gon's defenses, searching for the opening that Huyo practitioners know must eventually appear when aggressive offense meets patient defense. When Qui-Gon's blade position shifted fractionally, creating a line through his guard that lasted mere fractions of a second, Maul's blade followed that line with lethal precision. The psychological warfare inherent in Juyo extends beyond the unpredictability of its strikes. The form's aggressive nature creates constant pressure on opponents, forcing them into purely reactive defensive modes where they respond to threats rather than implementing their own tactics. This reactive state induces stress that accumulates over time, degrading decision-making capability and physical performance. Opponents watching a Juyo master approach know they face someone willing to abandon defense entirely in pursuit of overwhelming offense. Someone who will not slow, will not tire, will not grant a moment's respite until one combatant lies defeated. Maul's silent fury during combat added another layer to this psychological assault. Where some Sith employed Dun Moch, using words to unbalance opponents, Maul fought in complete silence, his focus absolute, his intent communicated entirely through the ferocity of his assault. This silence proved more unnerving than any verbal taunt could achieve. There was no bargaining with it, no reasoning with it, no appealing to any quality except the pure desire to destroy. The double-bladed lightsaber, though not required for Juyo, proved ideal for Maul's implementation of the form. The weapon's design allowed him to maintain constant offensive pressure from multiple angles simultaneously. Traditional Huyo techniques translate naturally to the double blade, with spins and rotations that would be purely defensive or transitional, with a single blade becoming offensive attacks with the second blade. The weapon extends Huyo's core principle, overwhelming aggression, by literally doubling the number of potential attack vectors in any given moment. Other notable Sith practitioners of Juyo throughout history include Darth Bane, who studied all 7 forms and incorporated Juyo into his personal combat philosophy. The ancient Sith Blade Master Kasim achieved mastery of all forms, including Juyo, using his comprehensive knowledge to adapt tactics to each opponent he faced. Galen Marek, Darth Vader's secret apprentice, demonstrated formidable Juyo capabilities, his unrestrained aggression and concentration allowing him to defeat opponents through sheer tenacity and overwhelming assault. The form's effectiveness against multiple opponents deserves examination, as this represents one of Huyo's few significant weaknesses. While Huyo's unpredictable aggression can keep multiple opponents off balance, the form's offensive focus provides limited tools for actual crowd control. A Juyo practitioner surrounded by skilled enemies must rely on superior speed and force to defeat opponents individually before being overwhelmed by coordinated assault. This explains why even masters like Darth Maul, when separated from supportive positioning and forced to engage multiple Jedi in confined space, could eventually be overcome. The physical demands of sustained Juyo combat challenge even Force-enhanced warriors. The constant aggressive movement, the need to maintain unpredictable attack patterns, the psychological stress of channeling intense emotion while maintaining technical control all create cumulative fatigue that can become decisive in lengthy engagements. Juyo works best when the practitioner can end fights quickly, using overwhelming initial assault to break opponents before fatigue becomes a factor. Prolonged battles favor more sustainable forms like Soresu or the balanced approach of Niemann. Juyo's relationship with other forms provides insight into how complete lightsaber masters construct their combat repertoire. Few warriors rely solely on Juyo, understanding that its weaknesses in prolonged or defensive scenarios require supplementation from other forms. Maul's study of Niemann principles alongside Juyo, Vader's suspected knowledge of Juyo techniques, despite primary reliance on Form V, even Sidious's mastery of all forms, including Juyo, these examples demonstrate how the most effective combatants build comprehensive skill sets rather than narrow specialization. The Jedi Battlemaster Sindralig and Grandmaster Yoda both possessed knowledge of Juyo alongside the other forms, demonstrating that Jedi recognition of the form's power overcame concerns about its dangerous nature when training the Order's most skilled warriors. Their mastery of Juyo allowed them to understand and counter the form when facing dark-side opponents, proving that knowledge itself need not corrupt if the student possesses sufficient discipline and commitment to the light. The forbidden nature of Juyo for centuries created mythology around the form that sometimes exceeds reality. Some accounts describe Juyo masters as nearly unstoppable, as warriors whose fury made them invincible. The truth is more nuanced. Juyo provides significant advantages in the hands of skilled practitioners, particularly those drawing on dark side power, but it remains a tool rather than guarantee a victory. Skilled opponents using appropriate counters can defeat Juyo users, as Obi-Wan Kenobi ultimately demonstrated against Maul despite being younger and less experienced. The key to countering Juyo lies in recognizing that its unpredictability, while formidable, still operates within physical and tactical constraints. A defender who maintains composure, who refuses to be overwhelmed psychologically by the aggressive assault, can identify patterns within the chaos. The Juyo practitioner must still obey basic biomechanical realities. Strikes must originate from somewhere, follow some path, recover to some position. A defender with sufficient skill and mental discipline can learn to read these underlying structures even within Juyo's chaotic expression. Darth Sidious, the most powerful Sith Lord in recent history, achieved mastery of Juyo alongside all other forms. His demonstration of the form against Jedi Masters during his attempt showcased Juyo at perhaps its most refined level. The speed of his assault, the ferocity of his strikes, the absolute commitment to overwhelming offense all embodied Juyo principles executed with technical perfection. 3 Jedi Masters fell in seconds before his onslaught, unable to mount effective defense against combat of such intensity. The Vapad variant of Form 7, developed by Jedi Master Mace Windu, represents an attempt to harness Juyo's power while maintaining light side alignment. Vapad creates a superconducting loop between practitioner and opponent, channeling the enemy's dark side power back against them while the user maintains their connection to the light. This sophisticated technique proved effective in Windu's hands, allowing him to match and even overpower Sidious temporarily, but it remains exceptionally difficult to master and carries enormous risk of falling to the dark side. For Sith practitioners, no such constraints apply. They draw directly on dark side power without concern for corruption, using rage and hatred to fuel Juyo combat at intensities that would consume lighter-aligned users. This freedom to fully embrace the form's demands gives Sith users of Juyo advantages that Jedi practitioners can never match without surrendering to the dark side themselves. It represents one of the clearest examples of how Sith philosophy translates directly into combat superiority in specific scenarios. Forbidden techniques. Breaking the rules. Beyond the 7 classical forms of lightsaber combat lies a realm of techniques so controversial, so antithetical to traditional fighting honor, that even Sith Lords debated their acceptability. These forbidden methods represent the ultimate pragmatism, the complete abandonment of any concept of fair play or honorable combat in pursuit of simple victory at any cost. They challenge fundamental assumptions about lightsaber dueling, exploiting gaps in orthodox technique that most warriors never consider. Among these forbidden techniques, none has generated more controversy than Trakata, a method so dependent on deception that both Jedi and Sith traditions historically viewed it with suspicion. Trakata's core principle is simple yet devastating. Deactivate your lightsaber during combat to create openings that conventional defense cannot address. By turning the blade off at the moment of opponent contact, the practitioner bypasses the opponent's parry entirely, then reactivates at a new angle to strike before the opponent can adjust their defense. The technique's name comes from ancient languages, meaning roughly deception or treachery, indicating how traditional warriors viewed this method. A lightsaber duel operates on certain assumptions about blade behavior. Both combatants expect their weapons to remain active throughout the exchange, to meet in clashes and parries that follow predictable patterns. Trakata shatters these assumptions, introducing an element of unpredictability that orthodox technique cannot easily counter. The mechanics of Trakata require extraordinary timing and reflexes. The practitioner must deactivate their blade at the precise moment opponent defense commits, in that fractional second when changing position becomes impossible. Too early, and the opponent adjusts to the disappearing blade. Too late, and the opportunity passes. The window for successful execution measures in mere hundredths of seconds, demanding reflexes enhanced by both extensive training and strong force connection. Following deactivation, the practitioner must reposition their hilt angle during the brief moment the blade is off, then reactivate at the new angle to bypass the opponent's now committed defensive position. This requires spatial awareness, verging on prescient, understanding exactly where the opponent's guard will be, where the openings exist, and how to place the reactivated blade through those openings before the opponent can react. The cognitive load of performing these calculations mid-combat while maintaining general situational awareness challenges even accomplished force users. A successful Trakata creates scenarios where defending becomes nearly impossible through conventional means. An opponent expecting a blade clash suddenly faces nothing, their defense positioned incorrectly for a threat that no longer exists in the location they prepared for. Before they can adjust, the blade reactivates at a new angle, striking from a direction their committed defense cannot address. The psychological impact compounds the physical threat. Knowing the opponent might deactivate at any moment creates hesitation, uncertainty that degrades defensive effectiveness even when Trakata is not being actively employed. The Stranger, a Sith Lord who operated during the High Republic era, demonstrated Trakata's lethal potential during his assault on Jedi on Kofar. His unique split-hilt lightsaber, which could separate into two weapons or function as one, proved ideal for Trakata applications. He used the technique to devastating effect against Jeki-Lan and other Jedi, deactivating portions of his weapon to slip past defenses, then reactivating to deliver killing blows before his opponents understood what had happened. The Stranger's combat approach combined Trakata with Juyo and Jarkai techniques, creating a fighting style of exceptional versatility and unpredictability. His lightsaber could function as a single blade, dual blades, or activate-deactivate sections independently, giving him tactical options opponents had never encountered. The cortosis armor he wore compensated for defensive weaknesses inherent in Trakata's aggressive offensive focus, allowing him to momentarily deactivate his blade for Trakata maneuvers without excessive risk from counterattacks during the vulnerable reactivation phase. The Jedi Order's classification of Trakata as forbidden stems from viewing the technique as fundamentally dishonorable. Jedi combat philosophy emphasizes straightforward engagement where skill determines outcome. The deception inherent in Trakata violates this principle, introducing trickery that the Jedi equate with moral weakness. From this perspective, a true warrior should not need such deceptive methods, should rely on superior technique applied honestly, rather than exploitation of opponent expectations. The Sith perspective on Trakata is more nuanced. While some Sith viewed the technique with suspicion, seeing the moment of blade deactivation as a dangerous vulnerability, others recognized its tactical value when employed by practitioners with sufficient skill. The technique's effectiveness against conventionally trained opponents made it valuable despite its risks. A Sith warrior willing to master Trakata gained significant advantage against opponents who never trained to counter such tactics. The vulnerability during blade deactivation cannot be overstated. For the fraction of a second when the blade is off, the practitioner possesses only a hilt, no weapon capable of defense. An alert opponent who recognizes the Trakata attempt can exploit this moment, launching counterattacks that the Trakata user cannot parry with their deactivated blade. This requires extraordinary reflexes and situational awareness from the defender, but against skilled opponents, the risk is very real. This vulnerability explains why Trakata works best when combined with other defensive measures. The stranger's cortosis armor provided protection during deactivation moments. Other practitioners might use force barriers, enhanced physical evasion, or fight in ways that minimize opponent opportunity to exploit the vulnerability. Successful Trakata requires careful setup, creating situations where the opponent is unlikely to recognize the deactivation quickly enough to respond effectively. The technique also demands complete familiarity with one's lightsaber's activation mechanism. Standard activation requires conscious trigger manipulation, but Trakata's demands for split-second deactivation and reactivation necessitate near instantaneous response. Some practitioners modified their lightsabers with hair trigger activation systems or developed force-activated ignition systems that responded to thought rather than physical manipulation. These modifications carry their own risks. Accidental deactivation in combat could prove fatal, but they made Trakata applications more practical. Historical accounts document various implementations of Trakata principles beyond simple blade deactivation. Some practitioners used the technique during saber locks, deactivating their blade momentarily to slip free of the bind before the opponent could capitalize on the sudden lack of resistance. Others employed Trakata to bypass defensive droid programming, which anticipated continuous blood contact and had difficulty adapting to disappearing weapons. Creative applications of the core principle proliferated wherever warriors prioritized effectiveness over traditional honor. Obi-Wan Kenobi, despite his Jedi alignment, employed Trakata-like techniques on several occasions, most notably during his confrontation with Darth Maul and Savage Opress on Florum. Cal Kestis briefly used Trakata during his duel with the Second Sister. These instances demonstrate that practical combat sometimes demands setting aside philosophical objections when facing overwhelming odds or opponents whose own methods discard conventional limitations. The psychological dimension of Trakata extends beyond individual combat applications. Knowledge that an opponent might employ the technique creates constant uncertainty, forcing defenders to prepare for possibilities that conventional training never addressed. Should they commit fully to parries, risking being wrong-footed by deactivation? Should they hold back, maintaining flexibility to respond to deactivation, but reducing the force of their defensive response? This uncertainty creates cognitive load that reduces overall combat effectiveness, even when Trakata is not being actively used. Training to employ Trakata effectively requires hundreds of hours of practice beyond standard lightsaber instruction. Practitioners must develop instinctive understanding of time and windows, must build muscle memory for rapid hilt reorientation during deactivation, must condition reflexes for instant reactivation. The physical skills, while demanding, prove easier than the psychological aspect, maintaining composure and tactical awareness while performing maneuvers that violate every instinct developed through traditional training. The effectiveness of Trakata against conventional defenses explains both its forbidden status and its occasional use, despite that status. Warriors who dedicate themselves to mastering the technique gain significant advantage against opponents who never trained to counter such tactics. In a galaxy where lightsaber combat traditions span millennia, where forms and techniques have been refined to counter every conventional threat, Trakata represents an asymmetric capability that disrupts established paradigms. Modern understanding of Trakata has been shaped by its depiction in The Acolyte, where the stranger's use demonstrated the technique's potential against multiple, highly skilled Jedi. The brutal effectiveness of his approach sparked renewed interest in forbidden techniques generally, raising questions about whether combat effectiveness should trump traditional restrictions on dishonorable methods. For Sith warriors who already reject such restrictions, Trakata represents just another tool, valuable if employed skillfully, discardable if not. Dunmuk, psychological warfare. Lightsaber combat is often portrayed as purely physical contest where blade meets blade and superior technique determines victory. This perspective ignores one of the most devastating weapons in the Sith arsenal, one that never requires touching a lightsaber hilt at all. Dunmuk, the ancient Sith art of psychological warfare during combat, recognizes that the strongest fortress can be made to open its own gates, that the most skilled warrior can be made to defeat themselves, that breaking an opponent's spirit proves just as effective as breaking their body. The term Dunmuk originates in ancient Sith languages, roughly translating to mind battle or will breaking. The practice developed over centuries as Sith lords observed that Force-sensitive opponents depend heavily on their connection to the Force, that this connection could be disrupted through psychological means, and that an opponent whose mind was in turmoil proved far easier to defeat physically. What began as simple taunting evolved into sophisticated psychological manipulation that could determine battle outcomes without landing physical blows. At its core, Dunmuk exploits fundamental Force mechanics. Jedi philosophy emphasizes emotional control and inner peace as prerequisites for strong Force connection. By creating emotional disturbance, Dunmuk disrupts this connection, degrading the opponent's Force abilities precisely when they need them most. Fear clouds prescience. Anger disrupts concentration. Self-doubt undermines confidence in one's own capabilities. Each emotional disruption degrades combat effectiveness incrementally, and Dunmuk seeks to accumulate these small degradations until they become decisive. The simplest Dunmuk applications involve verbal taunts delivered during combat. These are not random insults, but calculated attacks on specific psychological vulnerabilities. A skilled Dunmuk practitioner studies opponents before engagement, identifying insecurities, fears, sources of guilt, or shame. During combat, they reference these vulnerabilities with precision strikes aimed at inducing maximum emotional reaction. Count Dooku exemplified this approach during his duel with Anakin Skywalker aboard the Invisible Hand. His comments about Anakin's growth, delivered with condescending tone, targeted the young Jedi's insecurities about recognition and respect. "Your powers have doubled since last we met. Good, twice the pride, double the fall. These words, chosen carefully, aimed to provoke reaction that would disrupt Anakin's combat effectiveness. They succeeded, pushing Anakin toward anger that initially made him sloppy and overconfident. Darth Vader's use of Dunmukh against his own son demonstrates the technique at its most personal and devastating. The Force is with you, young Skywalker, but you are not a Jedi yet. This simple statement combined acknowledgement of Luke's potential with dismissal of his current capability, designed to create doubt precisely when Luke needed confidence. Vader's revelation of their relationship, "No, I am your father," represented perhaps the most devastating Dunmukh attack in recorded history, completely shattering Luke's worldview and emotional stability in a single moment. Darth Sidious took Dunmukh to its ultimate level, planning psychological operations that spanned years or decades. The entire Clone Wars could be viewed as a massive Dunmukh campaign against the Jedi Order. By manipulating galactic events to stretch Jedi resources thin, placing them in compromising positions, forcing them into roles as generals rather than peacekeepers, Sidious eroded the Order's connection to the Force itself. The distraction and moral compromise accumulated over 3 years made the Jedi vulnerable to Order 66 in ways no physical assault could have achieved. The technique's effectiveness against Jedi stems from their philosophical constraints. Jedi train to acknowledge emotions without being controlled by them, but this training assumes emotions arise naturally from circumstance. When a skilled Dunmukh practitioner deliberately induces specific emotional states through calculated manipulation, the Jedi's training proves less effective. The artificially generated emotional turmoil overwhelms the mental discipline normally sufficient for emotional regulation. Darth Maul's rejection of Dunmukh in favor of silent fury represents an interesting counterpoint. Maul believed in pure physical victory, in proving superiority through action rather than words. This approach had merit. His silence during combat proved more intimidating than any taunt. His absolute focus on destruction communicated intent more effectively than verbal threats. Yet, his eventual defeats, particularly his final confrontation with Obi-Wan on Tatooine, demonstrated the limitations of abandoning psychological warfare entirely. Obi-Wan's centered calm, his refusal to be provoked, contributed significantly to his victory. Successful Dunmukh requires remarkable self-control, a trait not commonly associated with Sith warriors. The practitioner must remain detached even while inducing emotional chaos in their opponent. They must deliver taunts calculated to provoke without becoming emotionally invested in the provocations themselves. They must maintain tactical awareness of the physical combat even while conducting psychological assault. This requires discipline that many Sith lack, explaining why truly effective Dunmukh users remain relatively rare despite the technique's widespread knowledge. Darth Bane demonstrated this principle during his time at the Sith Academy on Korriban. During a training duel with the Zabrak Sirak, Bane employed Dunmukh to systematically dismantle his opponent's confidence and focus. The words themselves mattered less than their delivery. The timing, the exploitation of vulnerabilities Bane had observed during the previous encounters. The Blade Master Qasim praised this display, recognizing that Bane had achieved victory through psychological superiority before physical dominance. The technique can backfire catastrophically if misapplied. An opponent who successfully channels provoked emotion into enhanced combat capability turns Dunmukh into a weapon against its wielder. Anakin Skywalker's transformation from overconfident attacker to focused instrument of destruction during his final duel with Dooku illustrates this reversal. Dooku's taunts pushed Anakin toward darkness, but instead of breaking his effectiveness, this pushed him to access power levels that overwhelmed Dooku's defenses entirely. Obi-Wan Kenobi's triumph over Maul in The Phantom Menace provides another example of Dunmukh reversal. Though Maul employed no verbal Dunmukh, his actions killing Qui-Gon, displaying overconfidence, focusing on victory at hand, rather than eliminating all threats, created psychological situation where Obi-Wan's desperation and anger enhanced rather than impaired his capabilities. The young Jedi channeled grief and rage into focused aggression that caught Maul completely by surprise. Advanced Dunmukh extends beyond mere words into force-based psychological attacks. Practitioners project fear directly into opponents' minds, create sensory illusions that undermine reality perception, or amplify existing doubts and insecurities through subtle force manipulation. These techniques prove harder to defend against than simple verbal taunts, as they bypass conscious awareness to strike directly at subconscious vulnerabilities. Darth Vader's approach to Dunmukh combined verbal elements with his overwhelming physical presence and the terror his reputation induced. Often, he employed no verbal taunts at all, letting his mere presence serve as psychological weapon. Jedi survivors facing Vader knew his reputation, knew of his power, knew the fate of others who had faced him. This knowledge created fear before combat even began, degrading their effectiveness before the first strike. The relationship between Dunmukh and dark side philosophy reveals deeper truths about Sith combat approaches. The Sith believe victory belongs to the strong by any means necessary, that employing every available advantage demonstrates wisdom rather than weakness. Dunmukh exemplifies this philosophy. Why engage in purely physical contest when psychological warfare can weaken opponents before physical confrontation begins? Why handicap oneself with notions of honor when dishonor achieves victory more efficiently? Jarkai, dual blade mastery. Two blades ignite simultaneously, their hum harmonizing into a sound that speaks of doubled danger and impossible coordination demands. Jarkai, the art of dual-wielding lightsabers, transforms the practitioner into a maelstrom of plasma and motion, presenting opponents with attack vectors that seem to multiply impossibly, defenses that cover angles single blade technique cannot address. In Sith hands, where aggressive offense already dominates combat philosophy, adding a second blade creates unprecedented offensive capability that can overwhelm even the most skilled single-blade opponents. The term Jarkai originates from ancient traditions, named after the city where the technique first developed, using paired conventional blades millennia before lightsabers existed. The fundamental principles translated well to plasma weapons. Using two blades allows one to attack while the other defends, creates multiple simultaneous threat vectors, exploits opponent confusion about which blade will strike next. The challenges of dual wielding prove significant enough that relatively few warriors mastered the technique, despite its obvious advantages. Jarkai is not technically one of the 7 classical forms, but rather a method that can be integrated with those forms. Practitioners typically base their dual-wielding approach in one of the primary forms, most commonly Neman, due to its balanced nature and incorporation of multiple fighting styles. However, skilled warriors have adapted Ataru, Makashi, Jimso, and even Juyo principles to dual blade work, creating personal styles that reflect individual strengths and preferences. The most common Jarkai configuration pairs a standard-length lightsaber with a shorter Shoto blade. This combination provides optimal balance between reach and control. The standard blade handles primary offense and defense. Its familiar length allowing techniques developed with single blade training to translate directly. The Shoto operates in close, covering angles the longer blade cannot reach efficiently, providing additional parrying capability and creating unexpected attack opportunities when opponents focus on the primary blade. Some practitioners, however, prefer matched-length blades, accepting the increased coordination demands in exchange for symmetric capability from both weapons. This approach proves more difficult to master, but offers advantages in sustained exchanges where both blades can maintain equal pressure. Asajj Ventress employed this method with her twin curved hilt lightsabers, each weapon a perfect mirror of the other. Her technique developing symmetric capability that made her equally dangerous with either hand. The coordination demands of effective Jarkai cannot be overstated. The human brain evolved to favor single-handed dominance, with the dominant hand performing complex manipulations while the off-hand provides support. Jarkai requires developing the off-hand's capability until it matches the dominant hand, transforming centuries of biological programming through intensive training. Even with force enhancement, this proves extraordinarily difficult, explaining why most dual wielders never achieve true ambidextrous mastery. Ventress's mastery developed under Count Dooku's tutelage, combining his Makashi precision with dual blade aggression into a fighting style uniquely her own. Her curved hilt lightsabers, similar to Dooku's own weapon, provided the enhanced blade control that Makashi demands, while the dual wielding multiplied offensive options. Against single opponents, she could press attacks with one blade while using the second for defensive coverage, creating pressure that forced opponents into purely reactive states where they responded to threats rather than implementing their own tactics. Her battles against Jedi like Ahsoka Tano and Luminara Unduli demonstrated Jarkai's effectiveness in skilled hands. Against Ahsoka, herself a dual wielder, the combat became an intricate dance where four blades wove patterns of light and shadow, each warrior seeking openings in defenses that seemed to have no gaps. Against Luminara, Ventress's aggressive dual-blade assault challenged the Jedi Master's defensive expertise, forcing Luminara to adopt more offensive responses than her typical Form 3 approach preferred. Darth Maul's use of dual wielding came later in his career, after his bisection on Naboo and subsequent survival. He paired his restored double-bladed lightsaber with the darksaber claimed from Pre Vizsla, creating an unusual Jarkai configuration. The combination of regular lightsaber and the unique darksaber presented opponents with weapons of different properties, further complicating defensive calculations. His duel against his former master Darth Sidious featured this combination, though ultimately insufficient to overcome Sidious's superior mastery of all techniques. Darth Sidious himself demonstrated Jarkai capability during his confrontation with Darth Maul and Savage Opress on Mandalore. He wielded both his primary lightsaber and a backup weapon simultaneously, displaying the ambidextrous skill that marked him as master of every combat technique. His dual-blade work combined with phenomenal speed created an offensive display that even two trained Sith warriors could not counter effectively, their combined strength insufficient against the Dark Lord's overwhelming mastery. The strategic advantages of Jar-Kai extend beyond simple doubling of attack capability. The technique provides superior protection in close-quarters combat, where a single blade might leave gaps in defensive coverage. It creates decision paralysis in opponents who must choose which blade to prioritize in their defenses, often resulting in suboptimal defensive choices that both blades can exploit. It allows the practitioner to engage multiple opponents more effectively, assigning one blade primarily to each enemy while maintaining awareness of both threats. The psychological impact of facing a dual wielder compounds these tactical advantages. Opponents see twice as many blades, creating visual impression of multiplied danger even before practical implications manifest. The coordination required to manage two blades signals exceptional skill, creating doubt in opponents who recognize the difficulty of the technique. The unpredictability increases as opponents must track two independent weapons rather than one, each capable of independent action, creating exponentially more possible attack combinations. Physical demands of sustained Jar-Kai combat challenge even force-enhanced warriors. The arms must work independently at high intensity, each managing a weapon that requires constant attention and precise control. Unlike single-blade technique, where one arm performs the complex blade work while the other rests or provides secondary support, dual wielding demands both arms maintain peak performance simultaneously. This proves exhausting even for well-conditioned warriors, making Jar-Kai most effective in shorter engagements rather than prolonged battles. Training to effective Jar-Kai mastery requires years beyond basic single-blade competence. Practitioners typically develop strong single-blade foundation in at least one classical form before attempting dual wielding. The offhand requires particular attention, extensive solo practice building its capability until simple movements become instinctive. Only then can the warrior begin integrating both blades into unified technique, learning the coordination and awareness necessary for true Jar-Kai effectiveness. Sith philosophy regarding Jar-Kai mirrors their approach to all techniques. If it increases combat effectiveness, study it. If it grants advantage, use it. The technique's difficulty matters less than its results. A Sith warrior who masters Jar-Kai gains significant capability against opponents who never developed counters to dual-blade technique. This advantage aligns perfectly with Sith values prioritizing whatever grants victory, regardless of tradition or conventional wisdom about proper combat methods. Darth Vader, evolution of a Sith combatant. The mask hisses with each mechanical breath, a rhythm that has become synonymous with fear across the galaxy. Behind that mask, within armor that sustains a broken body, resides one of history's most effective lightsaber combatants. Darth Vader's fighting style represents not just personal evolution, but a case study in how limitation, when met with determination and dark side power, can forge technique that surpasses what came before. Anakin Skywalker's transformation into Darth Vader forced adaptations that would have ended lesser warriors' combat careers. The injuries sustained on Mustafar destroyed most of his organic body. His limbs became cybernetic replacements. His lungs required mechanical assistance. His skin, burned beyond natural healing, necessitated the life support armor that became his permanent shell. These changes stripped away physical capabilities that had defined his fighting style for years. As Anakin, he had been perhaps the most naturally gifted duelist the Jedi Order had produced in generations. His reflexes bordered on prescient even by Jedi standards. His strength and endurance exceeded most human norms. His acrobatic capability allowed him to incorporate aerial techniques into combat with fluid grace. Form Phi Gem so perfectly complemented these natural gifts, allowing him to translate raw physical capability into devastating combat effectiveness. All of that died on Mustafar's volcanic shores. The body that remained could not perform the explosive movements that characterized Anakin's style. The armor added mass that slowed his motion. The respirator created constant audio signature that eliminated any possibility of stealth. The cybernetic limbs, though strong, lacked the neuromuscular feedback that allows precise control of organic muscle. Every aspect of his new physical form represented limitation compared to what he had possessed. Lesser warriors might have despaired. Vader adapted. He recognized that his new form, while limiting certain capabilities, provided advantages his organic body had lacked. Cybernetic servomotors provided strength beyond human maximum. The armor's mass, while slowing movement, added kinetic force to strikes and stability to defensive positions. The respirator's intimidating sound became a psychological weapon. Most importantly, his suffering and rage at his transformation provided connection to dark side power that his conflicted emotional state as Anakin had never fully accessed. The Form Vi foundation remained, but Vader modified it extensively to accommodate his changed circumstances. The explosive counterattacks that had characterized Anakin's Gemso became more measured, relying on positioning and superior strength rather than speed. Where Anakin had used aggressive footwork to create angles and pressure, Vader developed more static positioning that established defensive zones opponents struggled to penetrate. The incorporation of Form 3 Soresu principles addressed Vader's primary vulnerability, the life support systems integrated into his armor. The chest-mounted control panel and breathing apparatus represented critical weak points that required constant protection. Soresu's emphasis on tight, economical defensive movements that maintain body coverage aligned perfectly with this need. By blending Soresu's defensive discipline with Gemso's aggressive counterattacking, Vader created a hybrid style that covered his vulnerabilities while maintaining offensive capability. This hybrid approach manifested in combat as methodical advance punctuated by devastating strikes. Vader would establish position, his blade creating impenetrable defensive barrier through economical Soresu movements. Opponents attacking this barrier found their strikes deflected with mechanical precision, each deflection feeding into the next, creating rhythm that seemed impossible to disrupt. Then, when opponent commitment created opening, Vader would explode into Gemso counterattack with force that could literally throw opponents across rooms. The psychological dimension of Vader's combat style cannot be separated from its technical aspects. His reputation preceded him, every survivor spreading tales of the Dark Lord's invincibility. Jedi who faced him knew others had fallen, knew resistance appeared futile, knew fear before combat began. This fear degraded their force connection, impaired their technique, made them vulnerable before physical engagement commenced. Vader actively cultivated this psychological advantage. His mask's expressionless face provided no emotional feedback, no tells opponents might read. His mechanical breathing created constant audio reminder of his presence, nerve-wracking rhythm that accumulated stress over time. His deliberate, measured movements suggested confidence, bordering on arrogance, as if victory was inevitable and haste unnecessary. All combined to create overwhelming psychological pressure that broke many opponents before technical skill became relevant. His lightsaber itself reflected his evolution. The weapon featured similar design to his Jedi saber, but with modifications accommodating his cybernetic grip and incorporating power systems aligned with his new form. The blade's crimson color, achieved through corrupting the Jedi's kyber crystal in Sith ritual, served as constant reminder of his transformation and the power dark side embracement provided. Vader's dueling against surviving a Jedi during the Great Purge showcased his evolved technique against opponents who had known him as Anakin. Former Jedi Knights and Masters found their memories of fighting alongside him now worked against them. They expected the aggressive acrobatic style they remembered. Instead, they faced methodical advance and overwhelming power, fighting style that bore surface similarities to what they remembered, but operated on fundamentally different principles. His defeat of Jedi Master Kirak in Phila demonstrated this evolution clearly. In Phila, a skilled combatant who had survived Order 66 through isolation rather than combat, faced Vader expecting to confront a fallen Jedi, whose technique he might recognize and counter. Instead, he encountered warrior whose style incorporated elements he had never seen combined, whose power dwarfed anything Anakin had displayed, whose connection to darkseid granted capabilities beyond Infila's experience. The duel ended with Infila's defeat and Vader claiming his lightsaber's kyber crystal for corruption. The incorporation of Force abilities into Vader's combat style added layers beyond pure blade work. His telekinetic power allowed him to manipulate the battlefield, throwing obstacles, creating barriers, or simply hurling opponents when opportunity presented. His force choke could disable or distract during combat, creating openings his blade could exploit. His precognition, enhanced by dark side power, allowed him to position for counterattacks before opponents even began their assaults. This integration of force abilities with lightsaber technique exemplifies advanced combat mastery. Lesser duelists view force powers and blade work as separate capabilities requiring conscious switching between modes. Masters like Vader integrate them seamlessly, the blade work and force manipulation flowing together as unified combat system where each enhances the other. His ability to maintain perfect Sorasu defense with his blade while simultaneously using a force choke on an opponent demonstrated this integration at its peak. Vader's combat philosophy evolved alongside his technique. As Anakin, he had fought with passion that sometimes clouded judgment, enthusiasm that could lead to overextension, confidence that bordered on arrogance. As Vader, his approach became colder, more calculated. The passion remained, fueling his dark side connection, but discipline learned through suffering tempered its expression. He fought with methodical efficiency, expending energy precisely, creating and exploiting openings with calculated patience. His encounters with his former master Obi-Wan Kenobi illustrated this evolution dramatically. On Mustafar, Anakin's rage-fueled aggression had led him to tactical mistakes Obi-Wan exploited ruthlessly. In their rematch decades later, Vader's approach proved far more controlled. He advanced steadily, pressed advantage without overextension, used his superior power and reach to dominate engagement geometry. His eventual victory, cutting through Obi-Wan's defenses to damage his armor and mask, demonstrated how far he had evolved from the warrior who had fallen to Obi-Wan's blade all those years before. The duel with his son Luke Skywalker presented perhaps Vader's greatest challenge, not technically, but emotionally. Luke represented possibilities Vader had believed lost, connections to light side he had thought severed completely. Fighting Luke required maintaining dark side focus while confronting memories and emotions that threatened his Sith identity. The conflict within reflected in his fighting style, moments of overwhelming aggression alternating with hesitation uncharacteristic of his typical approach. Their first duel on Cloud City showcased Vader's technical superiority clearly. Luke, despite natural talent and some training, proved no match for Vader's mastery. Vader controlled the engagement completely, demonstrating the gap between talented newcomer and experienced master. He toyed with Luke, testing his capabilities, probing his training, all while maintaining complete dominance. The severing of Luke's hand served as brutal lesson in the consequences of insufficient skill facing superior power. Their final confrontation on the second Death Star reversed this dynamic. Luke had grown in capability, his training under Yoda and practical experience bridging the gap significantly. More importantly, Luke's temporary embrace of dark side rage amplified his strength to levels that matched or exceeded Vader's own. The son's fury-driven assault overwhelmed the father's defenses. Luke's aggressive form vibe barrage breaking through Vader's guard to sever his hand, mirroring the injury Vader had inflicted years before. Vader's ultimate redemption, sacrificing himself to save Luke from Sidious's lightning, represented final evolution. In that moment, he moved beyond Sith philosophy entirely, choosing love over power, light over dark. His technique had evolved from Anakin's aggressive brilliance through Vader's methodical domination to a final act that transcended combat entirely, proving that even the most fearsome warrior could choose differently when what mattered most was threatened. The legacy of Vader's fighting style extends beyond his personal journey. His adaptation of multiple forms to accommodate physical limitation while maintaining combat effectiveness demonstrates principles applicable to all warriors facing challenges. His integration of force abilities with blade work provides model for comprehensive combat mastery. His psychological warfare tactics show how reputation and presence can multiply technical capabilities' effectiveness. Darth Maul, the double-bladed demon. The double blade ignites with a sound like predatory hiss, crimson plasma extending from both ends of the weapon's hilt to create staff of destructive energy that speaks of double danger and ancient Sith traditions. Darth Maul stands ready, his tattooed face a mask of focused rage, his body coiled with potential violence waiting to be unleashed. In his hands, the double-bladed lightsaber transforms from unusual weapon choice into avatar of Sith fury, spinning death that cuts down Jedi with brutal efficiency. Maul's weapon, properly termed a saber staff or double-bladed lightsaber, represents ancient Sith traditions. The design dates back centuries, appearing periodically throughout galactic history whenever warriors sought the advantages dual-blade coverage provides. The saber staff solves certain tactical problems: defense from multiple angles, increased reach, ability to strike opponents on either side while creating others, particularly the weapon's length, making it unwieldy in confined spaces. Darth Sidious chose this weapon for his apprentice deliberately, recognizing that Maul's physical capabilities and aggressive temperament suited the saber staff's demands. Training from childhood, Maul developed fighting styles specifically built around the weapon's unique properties. Where most warriors learn single-blade technique first, then attempt adaptation to saber staff, Maul's training made the double blade his primary weapon from the beginning, allowing technique to develop specifically for its characteristics rather than adapting single-blade methods. The Form 7 Yuyo Foundation provided ideal framework for Maul's saber staff technique. Huyo's unpredictable aggression translated naturally to the double blade's capabilities. The form's emphasis on overwhelming assault through speed and ferocity aligned perfectly with the saber staff's ability to create attack streams that seemed to come from everywhere simultaneously. Maul adapted Juyo principles specifically for his weapon, creating variant of the form that maintained its core philosophy while exploiting double blade advantages. The spinning techniques that characterize Maul's style serve multiple purposes beyond mere spectacle. Each rotation creates defensive barrier as blades trace circles around the wielder's body, deflecting incoming attacks from various angles. Simultaneously, these spins generate offensive opportunities as blades exit the defensive rotation toward opponents, creating attacks that flow seamlessly from defensive movements. The psychological impact of facing spinning double blade cannot be overstated. The weapon becomes blur of crimson light that seems impossibly fast, impossibly dangerous, creating fear that degrades opponent effectiveness before actual strikes land. Maul's training incorporated extensive martial arts beyond lightsaber technique. His unarmed combat capabilities, his acrobatic prowess, his strength and conditioning all developed to support his saber staff work. The martial arts training provided foundation for the complex body mechanics required to wield double blade effectively. The acrobatics allowed him to navigate three-dimensional combat space with ease. The conditioning ensured he could maintain intense physical exertion the style demanded. His Zabrak physiology contributed advantages to his fighting style. The species' natural physical robustness and higher pain tolerance than baseline humans gave him edge in demanding combat. His horned head, vestigial feature in most Zabrak, became both identity marker and occasionally useful in close-quarters combat situations. His patterned facial tattoos, applied during Sith training, served psychological purposes, creating intimidating visage that enhanced fear responses in opponents. The Theed Power Generator duel represents Maul's technique at its peak effectiveness. Against two skilled Jedi simultaneously, he demonstrated why the Sith had come to dominate individual combat encounters despite numerical inferiority. His saber staff created defensive coverage that two Jedi attacking from different angles could not easily penetrate. His Juyo-based assault maintained offensive pressure even while defending against counterattacks. His use of environment, The multi-level platforms, the energy barriers, the vertical spaces showed tactical awareness that maximized his advantages while minimizing Jedi ability to coordinate their assault. The death of Qui-Gon Jinn at Maul's hand shocked the Jedi Order. A master of Qui-Gon's caliber falling to a Sith warrior represented failure of institutional understanding. The Jedi had believed Sith extinct, had allowed their combat techniques to drift toward forms optimized for peacekeeping rather than dueling against dark-side opponents. Maul's victory demonstrated the consequences of this complacency, showed how Sith, who maintained ancient combat traditions, could overwhelm Jedi, no longer expecting such threats. Maul's approach to combat reflected his training and personality. Unlike some Sith who employed Dunmukh to psychologically unbalance opponents, Maul fought in near-complete silence. His focus remained absolute. His intent communicated entirely through aggressive action rather than words. This silence proved more intimidating than any verbal taunt. There was no negotiating with it, no appealing to anything except pure desire to destroy. Opponents facing Maul confronted warrior who existed entirely in combat moment, whose attention never wavered, who gave no quarter and expected none. The bisection Maul suffered at Obi-Wan's hands would have killed any ordinary being. His survival through sheer force of will, sustained by dark side power and rage that refused to accept death, testified to his extraordinary constitution and unbreakable spirit. The years spent in madness on Lotho Minor, his body sustained by mechanical spider legs, represented descent that would have broken most minds. Yet Maul endured, his hatred keeping him alive where body should have failed. His restoration by Mother Talzin and subsequent return to combat demonstrated remarkable adaptability. The new mechanical legs provided different capabilities than his original limbs, requiring adjustments to technique developed for different body configuration. Yet Maul integrated the changes, his fighting style evolving to account for new physical realities, while maintaining core principles that made him effective. The later adoption of Darksaber, alongside his rebuilt double-blade saber staff, showcased his versatility. Wielding both weapons simultaneously in Jarkai configuration, he faced his former master, Darth Sidious, in combat that tested everything he had learned. Though ultimately unsuccessful against Sidious's overwhelming mastery, the attempt demonstrated Maul's willingness to adapt, to incorporate new techniques, to evolve beyond his initial training when circumstances demanded. Maul's combat effectiveness stemmed partly from his absolute commitment. He had been trained from childhood as weapon, his entire existence shaped to serve as instrument of Sith revenge. This single-minded focus eliminated doubts and hesitations that plague warriors with more complex motivations. Maul fought without reservation, without holding back, without concern for anything except victory and the advancement of Sith interests. This purity of purpose translated into combat style that never wavered, never second-guessed, never gave opponents opening created by internal conflict. The integration of Force abilities into Maul's fighting style enhanced already formidable technique. His Force-enhanced speed allowed the already demanding saber staff spins to accelerate beyond what opponents could track visually. His telekinetic power could clear paths through enemies or create barriers protecting against ranged fire. His precognition, while perhaps less refined than some Sith, proved sufficient for anticipating immediate threats and positioning appropriately. Maul's death at Obi-Wan's hands decades after their first encounter carried tragic poetry. The old Jedi Master, having learned much in the years since Naboo, recognized Maul's pattern and exploited it ruthlessly. The younger warrior's decades of obsessive focus on revenge had calcified his technique rather than allowing continued evolution. Where Obi-Wan had grown, adapted, and matured in his approach to combat, Maul remained trapped by rage that sustained him but also limited him. The final strike came so quickly that Maul barely had time to register defeat before darkness claimed him. The legacy of Maul's fighting style extends beyond his personal story. His demonstration that double-bladed lightsabers could be wielded with devastating effectiveness against skilled opponents inspired other dark side users to explore the weapon. His aggressive Juyo application provided template for combining overwhelming offense with unpredictable attack patterns. His integration of acrobatics and martial arts with lightsaber technique showed comprehensive combat development beyond mere blade work. For Sith warriors studying historical combat techniques, Maul represents a case study in specialized mastery. His development of fighting style specifically built around particular weapon choice. His adaptation of classical forms to exploit that weapon's unique properties. His commitment to aggressive Sith philosophy without compromise all provide lessons in how dedication to specific approach can achieve extraordinary effectiveness despite facing numerically superior opposition. Darth Sidious, master of all forms. In the shadows of ultimate power, where manipulation extends across decades and plans within plans determine galactic destiny, there sits a warrior whose lightsaber mastery equals his political genius. Darth Sidious, known to the galaxy as Emperor Palpatine, represents the pinnacle of Sith combat achievement. His mastery extends across all 7 classical forms. His knowledge encompasses forbidden techniques. His capability in lightsaber combat matches his unparalleled force power to create the most dangerous individual combatant the galaxy has witnessed in millennia. Sidious's approach to lightsaber combat differs fundamentally from specialists who perfect single forms. Rather than achieving supreme mastery in one style, Sidious pursued comprehensive understanding of all techniques, recognizing that true combat supremacy requires adaptability to any situation. This philosophy reflects his broader approach to power domination achieved through superior capability across all domains, leaving no weakness for enemies to exploit. His mastery of Form 7 in particular reached levels that perhaps only Mace Windu could match. Sidious's Juyo expressed dark side potential at its absolute peak, channeling rage and hatred of such intensity that his blade work became nearly impossible to follow visually. During his confrontation with the Jedi Masters, who attempted to arrest him, Sidious demonstrated Juyo that killed 3 Jedi Masters in seconds, his blade moving with such speed that even skilled observers struggled to comprehend the sequence of strikes that fell his opponents. The duel with Mace Windu represented perhaps Sidious's greatest challenge in lightsaber combat. Windu's Vapad, specifically designed to channel opponents' dark side power against them, created superconducting loop that turned Sidious's own strength into weapon against him. The Supreme Chancellor found himself matched in both technical skill and force power by opponent whose entire fighting style was built to counter exactly what Sidious brought to combat. Whether Sidious genuinely struggled or deliberately allowed himself to appear defeated to manipulate Anakin remains debated, but the technical quality of the exchange showcased two masters of Form 7 operating at the absolute peak of the form's potential. Sidious's lightning-fast assault style combined Form 7's aggressive unpredictability with speed, enhanced by dark side power to levels bordering on prescient. Witnesses to his combat describe his movements as blur, his blade appearing to be in multiple locations simultaneously, his strikes flowing together into streams of attacks that seemed to violate physical constraints on how quickly a body could move. This speed advantage, combined with perfect technique across all forms, made him nearly unbeatable in lightsaber combat when he chose to engage directly. Yet, Sidious rarely chose direct engagement when indirect methods served his purposes better. His genius lay partly in recognizing that while he could defeat any individual opponent, revealing this capability unnecessarily exposed information enemies might exploit. Better to manipulate situations so enemies destroy themselves or each other, preserving his own capabilities as final surprise for opponents who believed they understood his limitations. This calculated restraint exemplified Sith philosophy about power's application at strength unused until the perfect moment multiplies its effectiveness. The confrontation with Savage Opress and Darth Maul on Mandalore demonstrated Sidious at his most terrifying. Facing his former apprentice and a powerful warrior, both driven by hatred and desire for revenge, Sidious toyed with them. He wielded dual lightsabers in Jarkai configuration with such mastery that two skilled combatants attacking simultaneously could not penetrate his defenses. His taunts, combined with overwhelming physical dominance, destroyed any confidence they might have possessed, reducing former threats to helpless victims before being dispatched. His force abilities integrated seamlessly with lightsaber technique. Sidious could maintain perfect blade work while simultaneously unleashing force lightning, creating combat situations where opponents faced threats from multiple vectors requiring entirely different defensive responses. This integration reached such sophisticated levels that distinguishing where force power ended and technique began became impossible. They existed as unified combat system where each element supported and enhanced the others. The philosophical foundation underlying Sidious's combat mastery deserves examination. He viewed lightsaber combat as merely one tool among many for achieving dominance, but a tool requiring perfection nonetheless. His comprehensive study of all forms reflected belief that incomplete knowledge created vulnerability. An opponent who knew one form could be defeated by someone who knew that form's counters. An opponent who knew multiple forms remained vulnerable to someone who knew those forms better, plus additional techniques they had never encountered. This drive for comprehensive mastery extended beyond lightsaber technique into broader force abilities, political manipulation, scientific knowledge, and every other domain relevant to achieving absolute power. Sidious pursued excellence across all fields, recognizing that true dominance required superiority in every possible contest. His lightsaber mastery represented just one component of this comprehensive approach to power acquisition and maintenance. His construction of multiple lightsabers throughout his career reflected an evolving approach to personal combat. Each weapon incorporated technical refinements, lessons learned from previous engagements, adaptations to changing circumstances. The lightsabers themselves became repositories of accumulated knowledge, physical manifestations of his growing mastery. Yet he recognized the weapons as ultimately disposable tools, important but replaceable, unlike his knowledge and power, which represented his true strength. The duel aboard the second Death Star, where Sidious manipulated Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader into confronting each other, showcased his preference for indirect action when possible. Rather than engaging directly, Sidious created situations where his enemies destroyed themselves or each other. Luke and Vader's confrontation served Sidious's purposes regardless of outcome. Either Luke would kill Vader and become Sidious's new apprentice, or Vader would kill Luke and eliminate a threat. Only Vader's unexpected redemption disrupted this calculation, leading to Sidious's temporary defeat. His return in later years, sustained through Sith techniques of essence transfer and cloning, demonstrated his ultimate mastery extended even beyond death. The power to survive physical destruction through force of will alone, to transfer consciousness into new vessels, represented pinnacle of dark side achievement that perhaps no other Sith had accomplished. His continued threat across decades illustrated how true Sith power, once achieved at the highest levels, becomes nearly impossible to eliminate permanently. For students of lightsaber combat, Sidious represents impossible standard. His combination of perfect technique across all forms, overwhelming force power, comprehensive strategic thinking, and absolute commitment to dark side philosophy created warrior without equal in his era. Attempting to emulate his approach requires dedication beyond what most beings can sustain, training that spans lifetime or lifetimes, and willingness to sacrifice everything else in pursuit of combat mastery. The galaxy turns through its endless cycles, civilizations rise and fall, Force users are born and die, yet certain truths endure. Among these truths stands the undeniable reality that Sith lightsaber techniques shaped combat evolution throughout galactic history, pushing boundaries that the Jedi often feared to approach, exploring possibilities that tradition-bound warriors dismissed as forbidden or dishonorable. Every form, every technique, every innovation in lightsaber combat carries echoes of Sith influence. Form 2's elegant precision served Jedi duelists, but reached its apex in Count Dooku's aristocratic fury. Form V's aggressive power found homes in Jedi temples, yet achieved its purest expression through Darth Vader's inexorable advance. Form 7 remained restricted and feared by Jedi for good reason, while Sith lords, like Darth Maul, wielded it without reservation, channeling dark side power into ferocity that overwhelmed opposition. The forbidden techniques, Strakata's deceptive blade deactivation, Dunmuk's psychological warfare, Jar Kai's dual blade complexity, all emerged from Sith willingness to explore paths the Jedi rejected. Each technique offered advantages in specific scenarios, tools that pragmatic warriors recognized as valuable despite philosophical objections to their use. The Sith understood that victory, not honor, determines survival. That power, not principle, decides dominance. That effectiveness, not tradition, should guide combat development. This philosophical divide between Jedi and Sith approaches to lightsaber combat reflects deeper truth about their relationship with the Force itself. Jedi seek to suppress emotion, to find peace within themselves, to act as servants of the Force rather than its masters. Sith embrace emotion, channel passion into power, bend the force to their will through sheer determination and dark side understanding. These fundamentally opposed philosophies create entirely different approaches to combat, different techniques, different strengths and weaknesses. The eternal cycle of conflict between these philosophies drives innovation forward. Sith develop new techniques to exploit perceived Jedi weaknesses. Jedi adapt their own methods to counter these new threats. The pressure of this competition pushes both traditions toward ever higher levels of mastery, ensuring that lightsaber combat continues evolving rather than stagnating in ancient patterns that cease to serve modern needs. Individual warriors throughout history have embodied this evolutionary pressure. Darth Bane's establishment of the Rule of Two created a system where each generation of Sith had to surpass the previous, forcing continuous innovation in technique and application. Count Dooku's perfection of ancient Makashi demonstrated how classical forms, properly mastered, retain relevance across millennia. Darth Vader's adaptation to catastrophic injury showed how limitation can drive development of new approaches that prove superior to what came before. The legacy extends beyond specific techniques into broader lessons about combat philosophy. Sith, understanding that emotional intensity, properly channeled, enhances rather than impairs performance, has implications far beyond Force users. The recognition that psychological warfare proves as important as physical technique influences military doctrine across the galaxy. The willingness to explore forbidden knowledge, to test boundaries that tradition declares inviolate, drives progress in all fields, not just combat arts. Modern Force users, whether they align with light or dark or walk paths between, inherit this legacy. The techniques developed over millennia of Jedi-Sith conflict represent accumulated wisdom of countless warriors who refined their craft through actual combat rather than theoretical speculation. Each form embodies lessons learned, principles tested, truths proven through trials where failure meant death and success meant survival to fight again. The seductive power of Sith techniques lies not in some inherent corruption, but in their effectiveness. A warrior facing overwhelming odds might choose Huyo's aggressive assault over Soresu's patient defense because the situation demands ending fights quickly before being overwhelmed. A duelist seeking advantage against superior opponent might employ Trakata's deceptive deactivation because honor matters less than survival. A commander outnumbered might use Dunmok to break enemy morale because winning saves lives while losing costs them. These practical considerations explain why even Jedi, despite philosophical objections to dark side methods, occasionally employ techniques developed by Sith. Obi-Wan's use of Trakata against overwhelming odds, Luke's temporary embrace of aggressive rage to overcome his father. These moments acknowledge reality that sometimes idealistic principles must yield to pragmatic necessity when stakes become high enough. The future of lightsaber combat will continue reflecting this Sith legacy. New forms will develop, incorporating lessons from both light and dark traditions. Forbidden techniques will be rediscovered by warriors seeking advantages against opponents who never trained to counter such methods. The cycle will continue, light and dark, pushing each other toward evolution that neither would achieve alone. For those who study these techniques, who seek to understand rather than merely condemn, the Sith legacy offers invaluable knowledge, understanding how emotion can be channeled into power without consuming the warrior, recognizing how psychological warfare amplifies physical capability, appreciating how adaptation to limitation often produces innovation superior to what advantage permitted. These lessons transcend alignment with light or dark, providing insights applicable to anyone seeking mastery of combat arts. The double-bladed lightsaber spins one final time, its crimson blades tracing circles in the darkness, before deactivating with a hiss. The duel has ended, the lesson has been taught, the legacy of Sith combat techniques stands recorded in the blood of countless battles, preserved in the teachings passed from master to apprentice across generations, waiting to be rediscovered by future warriors who understand that power comes not from denying passion, but from mastering it. In the end, Sith lightsaber techniques represent more than mere combat methods. They embody philosophy about the nature of power, about the relationship between emotion and effectiveness, about the price of mastery and the rewards of absolute commitment. These techniques remind us that sometimes the forbidden holds the greatest wisdom, that sometimes the dangerous path leads to the strongest destination, that sometimes the dark side's seductive whisper speaks truths the light side prefers to ignore. The legacy endures, passed down through the ages, waiting for those with courage to study what others fear, strength to master what others avoid, and wisdom to understand that true mastery requires learning from all sources regardless of their origin. The Sith understood this. Their techniques reflect this understanding, and their legacy will shape lightsaber combat for as long as warriors carry plasma blades into battle across the galaxy. If you found this exploration of Sith lightsaber techniques insightful, consider showing your support by liking this video and subscribing to Sith Lore for more deep dives into the dark side of Star Wars history. The galaxy's darkness holds countless secrets still waiting to be explored, from ancient Sith lords who shaped the Order's foundations to obscure techniques and forbidden knowledge preserved in holocrons and forgotten temples. What aspects of Sith combat would you like to explore next? Should we examine the lightsaber techniques of specific historical Sith lords in greater detail? Investigate the Sith philosophy that underlies their approach to combat? Explore how Sith training methods differ from Jedi academies? Leave your suggestions in the comments below, and your ideas might shape future content. Remember that understanding the dark side's methods does not require embracing its philosophy. Knowledge itself remains neutral. The application determines whether it serves light or dark purposes. By studying Sith techniques honestly and comprehensively, we gain insight into perspectives that shaped galactic history. Understanding that informs rather than corrupts. Until next time, may the Force serve your purposes, whatever those purposes might be. The path to power awaits those with determination to walk it, the courage to face its challenges, and the wisdom to survive its tests. The legacy of the Sith continues, eternal as the dark side itself, waiting for new warriors to carry their techniques forward into whatever conflicts the future holds. Sleep well, knowing that somewhere in the galaxy, in temples hidden and academies secret, new generations train in these ancient arts. The lightsaber's hum echoes across the ages, carrying with it lessons learned through countless duels, wisdom purchased with blood and suffering, and power that comes from absolute dedication to mastery at any cost. The Sith way endures, patient as death itself, waiting for those strong enough to embrace its truths. The darkness welcomes all who seek power beyond conventional limitations, who reject restrictions that the fearful impose, who understand that true strength comes from accepting rather than denying the full spectrum of emotion and capability that the Force provides. The techniques described here represent just the beginning, foundations upon which dedicated warriors can build personal styles that incorporate Sith wisdom while adapting to individual circumstances and capabilities. May your rest be deep, your dreams filled with the crimson glow of lightsabers dancing through darkness, and your awakening find you refreshed and ready to pursue whatever mastery calls to your spirit. The galaxy awaits opportunities for those strong enough to seize them, knowledge for those wise enough to seek it, and power for those determined enough to claim it. The lesson ends. The legacy continues. The Force flows eternal through light and dark, through peace and passion, through serenity and chaos, offering its gifts to all who possess the strength to take them. The Sith understood this fundamental truth, built their techniques upon it, and created legacy that shapes combat to this very day. Now rest, and let these lessons sink into your consciousness, ready to emerge when needed, when the time comes to face your own challenges with techniques refined across millennia of Sith mastery.